Hello students. So today we're going to be learning a little bit more about cells. We went over them last week, but now we're going to be learning about what makes up a cell. So we're going to be learning about these new things called organelles. So to be a little bit more specific about what we're going to learn, the standard as it's written is you guys are going to be able to develop and use a model to describe the function of a cell as a whole and the ways that part of a cell contribute to the overall function of the cell. So later on during the week, we're actually going to have you guys actually make your own model, but don't freak out now. We're actually going to learn, what you guys are going to put in that model, so it'll become a lot easier. So my student goals for you guys are going to be able to describe how a cell functions as a whole system, and you're going to be able to list the different organelles that make up a cell and list their specific function and how it contributes to the overall functioning of a cell. So to review a little bit, last week we learned about what cells were. They're the basic building blocks of all living things. The human body is composed of trillions of cells. They provide structure for the human body. They take in nutrients from food and convert those nutrients into energy. And they carry out many more specialized functions. Those are just a couple of them. Another thing that we kind of know, I just want to get some background knowledge with you guys on, is the fact that we're all organisms, we're living organisms, and we have what's called the organ systems. So we have our heart, our lungs, and like our circulatory system, our nervous system, and these things are all made up by organs. And organs, like your heart, your lungs, those individually are made up by tissue, and tissue is made up by a group of specialized cells that work towards the same thing. So your heart is made up of tissue, your lungs are made up of tissue, your brain's made up of tissue, and those are all little cells that work together to perform that function of whatever organ, any given organ. So on the right here we have a picture of a animal cell, which is what most we're going to be going over today. And inside you see all these things, all these different things. These are called organelles. And that's probably the big thing that we're going to be taking out of this lesson, are all the different organelles and their given function. So what is an organelle? An organelle is a subcellular structure that has one or more specific jobs to perform in the cell, much like an organ does in the body. So cells have different types of organelles, each that perform a specific job vital to the overall function of a cell. So as you can see, just like in the other photo, there's a bunch of these things in here, and you can see all the names, and we're going to be going over what all these names are and what they do. So the first organelle I'm going to go over is the cellular membrane. And the cellular membrane is the outer edge of a cell, and it forms the boundary between the inside of the cell with all of its organelles and the extracellular matrix. So the function of it is to provide protection for the cell, and it gives it a fixed environment. And probably one of the main things is that it transports nutrients into the cell and transports toxic substances out of the cell. So it kind of regulates what comes in the cell and what goes out of the cell, and as on top of providing a fixed environment. So the next organelle that we're going to learn about is the nucleus. And the nucleus is a membrane-bound organelle that contains the cell's chromosomes. And the chromosomes, maybe not something that we've went over yet, but they're really what determines whether or not you're born a male or a female, or they really just determine your genetic DNA. So there's pores in the nuclear membrane that allow for passage of molecules in and out of the nucleus, and which is important. And we're going to learn about the nuclear membrane in the upcoming slides. So the main function that it has two main functions. It contains all the DNA, which I kind of went over, and it also directs the activities of the cell. So it's kind of like the center control area, and it really directs everything that the cell does. So the next organelle we're going to learn about is the nucleolus, which you might get confused with the nucleus, but I'm going to try to teach it in a way that you can kind of distinguish the two. So the function of the nucleolus, it's a small area within the nucleus, but it's where ribosomes are made. And we're actually going to learn what ribosomes are in the next upcoming slides. As you can see, this right here is a nucleus. This whole entire thing is a nucleus, and then the nucleolus is within the nucleus. And then remember, the nucleolus is where ribosomes are made. So let's pair share right now. Go ahead and we'll turn and talk with our partner and discuss this question. What is the difference between a nucleus and a nucleolus, and how are they related? And then after 1 minute of them discussing, I'll bring everyone back. I'll have a pair to share what they got, and then we'll go over what I have here, which is that the nucleus contains the cell's DNA and directs activities of the cell, while the nucleolus is found within the nucleus and is responsible for producing ribosomes. So the next organelle that we're going to learn about is the nuclear membrane. The nuclear membrane is similar to the cell membrane, except that it surrounds the nucleus within the cell. So the cellular membrane surrounds the cell as a whole, while the nuclear membrane surrounds the nucleus. So the nuclear membrane, it's porous and allows RNA and proteins to pass in and out of the nucleus. So very similar to the cellular membrane, this regulates what goes in and out of the nucleus, while the cellular membrane regulates what comes in and out of the cell. And then as you can see, here's a picture of a nucleus, there's the nucleolus, and then surrounding it is your nuclear membrane. So the next organelle we're going to go over is ribosomes, and we've talked about these earlier. Remember, the nucleolus within the nucleus produces these, or plays a role in producing these. And ribosomes are organelles made up of RNA and protein, and they're either attached to the endoplasmic reticulum or they're suspended in the cytosol. And both of those are other organelles that we're going to learn about in the upcoming slides. So the main function of a ribosome is that they facilitate protein synthesis, and that means that they play a big role in producing proteins. So the synthesis is to make up something, and so the ribosomes, their main function is to produce proteins. So as you guys can see here in this picture right here, all these little dots over here, these are those free ribosomes that are in the cytoplasm, and we'll talk about the location of ribosomes and where you can find them in the cell in the coming slides. So the next organelle that we're going to learn about is the cytoplasm, or the cytosol. The cytosol is a thick gel-like fluid that fills the space inside of a cell, and it's where the organelles are suspended in. So all the organelles that are in a cell, they're within the cytosol. So, and then the name of the total contents of the cell, so the name of the total contents of the cell minus the nucleus is the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm includes, it basically includes, it's just the cytoplasm. It doesn't include the organelles. So to kind of simplify it, the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm includes both the cytosol and all the other suspended organelles, while the other than the nucleus. So let's go back to that slide. So as you guys can see, the cytosol is this fluid that's all around the place, and then the cytoplasm is all of it, including all these suspended organelles minus the nucleus. So for the next slide right now, let's go ahead and have another pair sharing opportunity. Go ahead and turn with your partner and discuss this question. What is the difference between the cytoplasm and the cytosol? I'll give my students about a minute to discuss that at most, and then I'll bring them back, have a pair or two share what they discussed and what they came up with, and then we'll go over the answer together. So the cytosol is the thick gel-like fluid that fills the space within the cell, and then the cytoplasm includes both the cytosol and the other suspended organelles within a cell. So the cytoplasm includes both the cytosol and the organelles, while the cytosol is just that fluid that's just around the cell, that it doesn't include individual suspended organelles. So the next organelle that we're going to learn about is the endoplasmic reticulum. It's a pretty important one. It's composed of interconnected membranous channels called cisternae, and they're connected to the nuclear membrane. So you'll see this, you'll see the endoplasmic reticulum basically connected to the nucleus because it's connected to the nuclear membrane, which surrounds the nucleus. And one of its main functions is in the transportation and modification of molecules. And there's two different types of endoplasmic reticulum. So it may be either rough or smooth. And the rough endoplasmic reticulum, they have ribosomes bound to its surface. And remember, we talked about what ribosomes are and that their function is to produce proteins, right? So as you can see over here in this picture, we see the rough ER, and the rough ER, they have all these little circle dots on it. They look white right there. Those are the ribosomes. And then we're talking about how the function of the ER has to do with the transportation and modification of molecules. So the rough ER, because it has all these ribosomes produce proteins. So we can kind of tie two and two together that the transportation and modification that goes on in the rough ER has to do with proteins. So the function of the rough ER is to modify and transport proteins made by the ribosomes, and either to have them for use or for further modification. And then we have the smooth ER, which in this picture is over here on the left, and that it doesn't have those ribosomes attached to it. And that's because this part of the endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for modification and transport of other types of molecules, such as lipids and steroids. And lipids and steroids, they are fat and cholesterols. So I'll move on to the pair share activity I have. So what makes the difference between the smooth endoplasmic reticulum and the rough endoplasmic reticulum? Go ahead and discuss that with your partner, and then we'll pick out some partners to share what they got. Okay, and after we've discussed that and how to pair or to share, we'll go over the answer together. The rough endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes bound to it, while the smooth endoplasmic reticulum does not. So the rough ER modifies and transports proteins, while the smooth endoplasmic reticulum modifies and transports lipids and steroids. So the next organelle that we're going to learn about is the Golgi apparatus, and this is what it looks like over here on the right. And the main function of the Golgi apparatus has to do with packaging and shipping. It takes molecules produced by the cell, such as proteins, lipids, and it modifies them if necessary. And then it packs them into vesicles so that they can be shipped around or outside of the cell. So the main role that the Golgi apparatus does has to do with packaging and shipping molecules in or out of the cell. As you can see in the picture here, you have outgoing secretory vesicles and incoming transport vesicles. So on to the next organelle, the mitochondria. The mitochondria, they're large organelles that have both an inner and outer membrane, as well as their own mitochondrial DNA. And the big thing with these things is they have to do with the production of energy. So they're a mitochondria, they're the site of cellular respiration in cells, which is where oxygen and glucose, which is sugar, are converted into adenine triphosphate, or ATP, and that's like the main source of energy that animals and humans use for energy is ATP. So the main function of the mitochondria is the production of energy. So the next organelles that we're going to learn about are the centrioles. So the centrioles, they play a big role in the organizing of microtubules, which really help serve as the cell's skeletal system. And they're actually a part of centrosomes, and the centrosomes, they duplicate as cell division begins, and they move to the opposite ends of the cell. So these play a big role in cell reproduction. The next organelle we're going to learn about is the cytoskeleton, and the cytoskeleton is a network of filaments and tubules that allow organelles of the cell to remain in place and give the cell strength and shape. So just like the humans with our bones, how they keep us structured, the cytoskeleton are made up of little filaments that help give the cell its shape and keep its shape. So to conclude, all the organelles that we've listed perform a specific function vital to the cell as a whole. When cells work together, as they do in organisms, they form groups called tissues, which in turn group together into organs. and organs are arrays of cells all working together